Good afternoon. This is Campbell McCreary from Amvest Capital in New York City. Welcome to the Amvest Capital Inc. live webinar with Silver One Resources Inc. Silver One trades on the venture as SVE, Sierra Victor Echo, and on the OTCQX as SLVRF, Sierra Lima Victor Rio Foxtrot. Hope you will enjoy today's program. It will be available on demand about an hour after we wrap up here. You'll not only get an email for it, but you can always go to amvestcapital.com/replays and it'll be there. Do feel free to chat in your questions in the question pane of GoToWebinar. We love questions. Greg will love your questions, and it's a real great way to keep up on the story and get down to what you need. Amvest is a New York-based specialist investment bank and corporate finance firm focused solely on the natural resource sector. And as we are licensed and covered by the broker-dealer, we have our own disclaimer. Of course, this call is most definitely for informational purposes only. Please read this thoroughly. We're pleased to have with us today Greg Crow. Making you presenter, Greg, and turn on your webcam. He's over 30 years of experience in the exploration and mining sector. Many of you will know him for being the leader, the helm of Entree Gold, which he transformed. That was the big Mongolia Oyu Tolgoi play, and brought it into a JV with Rio Tinto and its partner, Turquoise Hill Resources. So some great work there. Again, we'll be asking you for questions. Please send them in. If you can't figure out the question feature on GoToWebinar, you got my email, and just email it in. With that, I have audio and video, Greg, so
perfect. Okay. Thank you very much, Campbell, and thank you for everyone who is attending today. And for the new investors out there, it'll be, I'll go through the whole presentation. For those of you who are familiar with the story, might be a bit repetitive, but have patience. You know, we slowly are developing this company and advancing the various assets. So let's get going on the presentation. Brief history. Company started in mid-2016. The idea was to create a new silver company based on 3 Mexican silver assets that were acquired from a company called First Mining Finance. That's one of the companies in the stable of companies run by Keith Neumeyer. As time progressed and silver prices didn't quite continuing going up as they had been doing in mid-2016 when we formed the company, we started looking for assets that were a bit more advanced, and we targeted the past producing Candelaria silver mine in the state of Nevada. This is a photograph of it that just came up on the screen. 2 big past producing open pits. You see one here on the screen, 2 big past producing heap leach pads as well. Not only will we be talking about the Candelaria project, but I'll also be talking about 2 other projects that we have acquired. Another one in Nevada that we staked. We have 100% ownership, large epithermal high-grade silver gold copper system. And then I'll be talking about a more recent acquisition in 2020, an extremely high-grade opportunity in the state of Arizona that we have the ability to acquire 100%. Now, we did do a financing mid last year, 9.5 million. These are Canadian dollars. Of that, Eric Sprott put in 5 million of the 9.5 million, and that was the 3rd time that he had invested into our company via private placement. That said, let's talk a little bit about silver and why silver. First of all, the uses. It's used in many different industries, and worldwide uses are continuing to grow. The most important growth is occurring, of course, in electric vehicle, in solar panels, but also in every single item that most of us use on a daily basis, including some of the more traditional uses such as silverware, jewelry, etc. But the thing about silver is it's not only a precious metal, but it is also an industrial mineral. There are very few silver mines in the world. Most of them are essentially, most silver is mined as a byproduct from other types of mines, such as copper, lead, zinc, or gold mines. But there are a few, and our Candelaria is certainly one example of a pure silver mine, at least to date. Now, what about silver? It produces somewhere around 800 million ounces annually, but the uses are expected to go up to about 1 billion ounces annually in the not too distant future. The solar panels and EVs alone are projected to consume an additional 200 million ounces by 2025 and possibly north of 500 million ounces after that. So the demand for silver increases while the supplies continue to decrease, putting a lot of upward pressure on the prices of silver. Now, silver is an interesting one. On the precious metal side, it performs better than gold in bull markets. And most people believe we are in the beginning of another bull precious metals market. As a matter of fact, Goldman has called for a 10-year commodity super cycle, which we're really just at the beginning of. So look forward to what's going to be happening here with not only silver, but silver and gold prices as well. But let's talk about the assets that we've got. First of all, the Candelaria past producing silver mine in the state of Nevada, #1 mining jurisdiction in the world, well situated just off the main highway that joins Reno to Las Vegas. It was an early producer discovered in 1864, a year before the end of the US Civil War. Up until 1959, it produced from near surface high-grade underground silver oxide veins at an average rate of 1,250 grams per ton silver. For those of you not familiar with underground mining, many underground mines today are producing anywhere between 250 and 500 grams per ton silver. The really high-grade ones might be encroaching on 1,000 grams per ton, but they're few and far between. After the 1950s, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was converted to big open pit mining. Kinross was the last operator. They produced up until 1999, and with the collapse of silver prices to well under $5 per ounce silver, they decided to shut it down and start reclamation. They sold it off to Silver Standard in 2001, 2002. They did a drill program, outlined some fairly sizable new resources, did some studies, but with silver prices still languishing under $5 per ounce silver, they decided to move on to other projects. We approached them in late 16 and entered into an agreement in early 17 with the ability to acquire a 100% interest in the Candelaria project with no royalties back to Silver Standard. Now, Silver Standard at the time was just rebranding. They were focused on gold mining, and they changed the name to SSR Mining, and they've since done a merger with Alisar and to form a new gold producing company, and they were selling off a lot of their old previous silver assets, so we got a pretty good deal on the project. Let's talk about some of the resources there. These were 43-101 compliant back in 2002, but they're old, so we must call them historic. There were measured and indicated resources amounting to about 44 million ounces of silver, plus additional inferred resources of just under 35 million ounces of silver. This silver is in situ, in ground, and it occurs just on the northern down dip margins from the big open pits. But that's not all the silver that there is at Candelaria. Kinross left behind a lot of silver in the old Heap leach pads. They just turned off the tap when they walked away in 97 to 99. That silver is still there. We've drilled off the leach pads. We've done some metallurgical studies, and we've recently put out an updated 43101 resource on the Heap leach pads, which would be additive to those historic in situ in-ground resources. Leach pad number 1, which is the big leach pad that you saw in that initial photograph, is estimated to host approximately 30 million ounces of silver. Leach pad number 2, that's hidden in behind the little hill here, is estimated to contain about half that, both at an average grade of about 42 grams per ton silver. Now, why do we feel that these heap leach pads might be amenable to reprocessing and recovering the silver? Well, there is another operation in Nevada. It is Coeur's Rochester mine to the north of Reno. They are currently mining silver oxide ore, similar to what came out of the big open pits at Candelaria, and they're processing on big heap leach pads, very similar to our Candelaria project. And their average head grade is 15 grams per ton silver, and they're getting about 50% recoveries. So can we make a go of the 42 grams per ton silver on heap leaches that have been partially leached in the past? We're doing our metallurgical studies. That work is ongoing, and I'll come back to that after I talk a little bit about the infrastructure and some of the drill work that we've done recently. Infrastructure-wise, as I said, just off the main highway that joins Reno to Las Vegas. 2 miles of paved road past that hidden leach pad number 2 to past leach pad number 1 to the old processing site. Not a lot left there. 2 big open pits with down dip on the northeast side. Resources worked out by Silver Standard. There's a power line. It comes along right to the old processing site. It's operable. We pay our monthly power bills. We have 2 water wells, each capable of 500 to 700 gallons per minute. So we have all the ingredients required for potentially rehabilitating this past producing mine. Now, some of the work that we've done, particularly around the 2 big open pits, we did some early drilling, and we found some fairly high-grade results down dip from where Silver Standard had their resource. For instance, we were getting some values up there to about 1,100 grams per ton silver and 1.3 grams per ton gold over 8 meters within a 30-meter wide interval with very good grades that could be amenable to underground mining methods. We then initiated a 15,000 meter diamond or reverse circulation drilling program, and we had 3 main goals to achieve with that program. We just completed the program. We're still getting assays coming in, but some of the preliminary assays in this down dip higher grade region return values up to over 1,000 grams per ton silver and 1.5 grams per ton gold over 3 meters within a 12-meter wide interval of very good, potentially underground mineable grades. And more recently, we put out a news release talking about 1,700 grams per ton silver and 2.5 grams per ton gold over 1.5 meters within an 8-meter wide interval. Again, very good area in through here that is becoming a coherent body. Need to do a bit more drilling, but it looks like for future extraction considerations, this is a zone that could be potentially mineable from ramping down from the base of the pit and accessing that very high-grade mineralization. Now, the second goal of the program was to look at potential extensions to the open pit mineralization. A lot of those results have not come in yet. We haven't received the assays, but we expect to get them in the next few weeks. But it looks like there are extensions up to 500 meters to the west, a couple of hundred meters to the east. It remains open because we haven't drilled beyond there, but we are getting some preliminary results coming back, 200 grams per ton silver and 0.5 gram gold over about 14 meters in this area. This is the near surface type extractable mineralization. These are very good grades considering that the average production grades from Kinross from the open pits was between 80 and 110 grams per ton silver. So lots of potential there. We want to do an additional program coming up, probably after we get the results from all of these drill holes here and here. We'll then reassess select new drill holes, and then commence about a 7,500 meter program, probably in the early part of Q3. There is one other goal that we tried to achieve at Candelaria with that 15,000 meter reverse circulation program. We had flown the property, did an airborne magnetometer survey. The northern part of the property is marked by a pronounced magnetic high in purple and red, juxtaposed against the strong magnetic low in blue, greens, and yellows. The major controlling structure on all the mineralization is marked by that very sharp contact and goes off the property to the east, where there's actually a small producing silver gold mine, and where Hochschild had been doing some drilling. So not only do we have potential along strike oxide mineralization from the pits, we've got down dip high grade, but in the area between the Georgine pit and the Northern Bell pit, we're finding a different type of mineralization that was never talked about at Candelaria. We're finding essentially mineralization that looks like this. It is an extremely altered, intrusive porphyritic rock shot through with chalcopyrite, which is a copper-bearing mineral. So could there be underlying the entire silver oxide potential at Candelaria, a buried porphyry copper-related system? We did analyze some of these samples, and they came back as high as 2.76% copper with a good silver credit and a good gold credit. So could there be a large system? Wouldn't be unheard of. We do have a porphyry-related deposit, IOCG or skarn, just to the north of us, which is run by Nevada Copper at their Pumpkin Hollow deposit at the town of Yerington. So we're doing a couple of things at Candelaria, just waiting on the results of the rest of that 15,000 meter drill program. Should have them in the next few weeks. We're also doing continued metallurgical testing on not only the heap leach material, but on the pit extension material. The idea is, can we combine those two types of materials to increase grades and recoveries? The goal is to try and put out an economic study by the end of the year. We want to look at potential high-grade underground for future resource potential, and then we want to continue testing for this. Could be a very significant porphyry system at depth. So that's what we're doing at Candelaria, and that's where we're going. So stay tuned. Later this year, there should be lots of news flow on that. Let's go look at our Cherokee project. Cherokee is an earlier stage project, but quite exciting. We had done some research, and we found in one of the old mining journal a reference to Cherokee, and they talked about mining in the 1800s in the thousands of grams per ton silver. It's right south of an area called Pioche mining camp that started in high-grade epithermal silver and gold veins. When they got down deeper into the system, they got into big carbonate replacement deposits with abundant copper, lead, zinc, silver, and gold. They mined that up to the mid-1900s. So we went and we looked at Cherokee. The old Cherokee mine sits right here, a few workings at Southeast Cherokee. We walked the veins and traced them over 12 kilometers or 9 miles along strike. We looked at the legal title. It was open, so we staked the entire ground, bought the patented claims that overlie the old mines, and also an artesian water well. The only recorded drilling in the entire area was down around the Blue Nose in the southeast section of the property. They drilled in the 70s and 80s for a deep buried porphyry molybdenum deposit. They never got through the overlying limestones, the same age limestones that host the Pioche mineral camp to the north. But it's an interesting target because there are all sorts of areas of alteration and veining that surround a potential buried porphyry. I'll talk more about that coming up. We did some detailed sampling on the veins themselves. We essentially looked at the area in detail around Cherokee, the area around Hidden Treasure. We give you some idea of the surface sampling that we did around Cherokee. Here are the patented claims around the Cherokee and the Southeast Cherokee. Abundant samples that came back very rich in silver and copper, which is interesting. Values up to 900 grams per ton silver, 2.8% copper, values to 1,100 grams per ton silver, 2.3% copper. Down to the southeast of the property, we essentially have a very wide system with multiple veins. We need to do more sampling there, but we're getting select samples as high as 1,800 grams per ton silver and 2.0 grams per ton gold. Lower copper values. This suggests that we're in an epithermal system that's higher in the epithermal system than up at Cherokee, where we're seeing the appearance of base metals. So we've got an interesting system. We flew the property very similar to what we had done at Candelaria, airborne magnetometer survey. Interesting mag high in the southeast that could be representative of that buried molybdenum porphyry that they were targeting with their drilling in the 70s and 80s. All sorts of on-surface veining and alteration surrounding it, and these big northwest trending structures. We're going to go back this year. We're going to do some more detailed sampling, particularly in the Johnny Hidden Treasure area, maybe Majoto as well, and see if we can upgrade those to drill targets. But we do have drill targets at the Cherokee Mine. They're on patented claims, so we're contemplating getting a drill in there later this year and drilling some of those really rich silver copper veins at the Cherokee Mine. Now I'm going to tell you about our third opportunity, which is the Phoenix Silver Project, just outside the town of Globe, Arizona. Now Globe is a big porphyry copper producing area, probably one of the larger ones in the world. Big mining companies in there, Freeport-McMoRan, Rio Tinto, BHP, and just to the northeast is an old silver camp. Well, some prospectors came to us last year and they said, we've got this project. We're finding all sorts of silver fragments, but we can't find the source of them. There's no outcrop on the property. So they went back up with their metal detectors, and about 1.5 meters down, they dug into an old dry creek bed, and they uncovered these big vein fragments. This guy here weighed in at 417 pounds. It's a collector's item. We didn't actually assay it. We didn't want to destroy it, but we did specific gravity determinations, estimating this to contain up to 70% silver. Now, if you notice how angular and unabraded these are, which suggests they haven't traveled very far from their source. So we entered into an agreement with the ability to acquire a 100% interest. Here's the town of Globe, 20-minute drive to our property. Big porphyry copper producing area just to the south and west of us, and an old silver camp to the northeast. That's the major regional strike in that direction. These silver, old silver mines talked about production of native silver. Now the prospectors did let us assay some of the smaller vein fragments that they had given to us. And this one here, that's all native silver that you're seeing in that photograph. That returned up to 459,000 grams per ton silver. Remember what I said about current underground mines are mining in the 250 to upwards of 500 grams per ton silver. There's very few that actually get up to over 1,000 grams. So these values are unheard of elsewhere in the world. There's a couple of places that equates to about 14,500 ounces of silver. There are some other places in the world that have these types of systems. One of them is in Cobalt, Ontario, Canada. It was an old silver cobalt producing camp. They had some materials that looked very similar to this. That camp produced over 450 million ounces of silver. So our job is to try and find the source of these veins. There's our property. We've added some more ground to the north. I'll talk about that a little bit. But essentially, we've done surface geophysics, surface soil geochemistry. We have done airborne geophysics. Again, there's not much outcrop here, but here's where those big vein fragments were found. Just upslope, we think we've got a very interesting target. We have applied for a drill permit for this area here. We're waiting on that drill permit. As soon as we get it, we'll get a drill in there and test to see, can we find the source of that extremely high-grade mineralization. But to complicate the situation as well, in a more positive sense, we've got other veins down here, and these ones are a little bit different in that not only are they high-grade silver, but they also contain gold, copper, lead, zinc, and molybdenum. And we believe there's an overprinting from the big, younger porphyry copper mineralizing event just across the valley to the south of us. And our neighbors immediately on our western border have actually entered into an agreement with South 32 out of Australia, and they are currently drilling for a buried porphyry system. So we might have extremely high-grade vein opportunities up and through here, and we may have possibly an extension of a porphyry system down in through here, and we're finding additional mineralization up to the north as well. So very promising property. Stay tuned. We want to get our drill in there as soon as we get our permits. A little bit slow right now, but and then we'll start evaluating the other aspects of the project as well. So 3 very promising projects. Candelaria, just to recap, we're going to be doing another drill program, just waiting on the results of the rest of that 15,000 meter program. They should come in the next few weeks, and then we'll get drilling again. Continuing on metallurgical testing, not only on the heap leach pads, but on the along strike mineralization from the open pits. The goal is to try and get an economic study out by the end of this year. Cherokee, we want to get in and do some more mapping and sampling, possibly drilling those silver copper veins around the old Cherokee mine. Phoenix Silver, we do have a drill permit that's applied for, waiting for that. We'll continue to advance that project. So those are the projects. These are some of the stats with respect to our stock since the initiation of the company back in mid-2016. Eric Sprott is our largest shareholder, just around 17%. He invested in 3 of the past private placements that we did, so he's been a long-term faithful shareholder. We do have still about 12 million in our treasury. We've had lots of our warrants exercised. They're all in the money, and ample treasury to be able to advance the projects and complete those work programs that I spoke about earlier. So that is the presentation. Thank you very much. And are there any questions?
There are questions. Thank you all for sending it in. So Greg, I'm just going to start somewhat of a shareholder who's concerned about current valuation and performance vis-a-vis the larger market of silver equities, and wondering, is this COVID related or maybe progress of some of the potential projects not as going as fast as we would have liked to? I'll sort of leave that to you to answer. What do you say?
Well, it's kind of a vague question, and I'm not sure exactly what that person is getting at.
Any thoughts on valuation?
Yeah. So valuation, I think the valuation has held up pretty good. Essentially, if we look at our share price, it's been fairly consistent over the last several months. We look at a lot of the other non-producing silver companies. They have gone up and they've come off. Some of them are off 30, 40, 50% from their highs. And I'm just going to make a slight interruption here because I'm getting a low battery signal. And I'm going to plug in my computer. At least I think I will. Anyway, let's hope we'll get through this here. Yeah, so I think we've held up pretty well. Yes, indeed, some of the programs haven't gone quite as fast as we had hoped, but we're moving forward and we've got lots of work planned moving forward. So stay tuned.
Okay, might as well close that out. When it comes to just again, how many ounces are you going to drill this year and next? What's your kind of
Wow.
estimate? You can
Well,
customize that.
That's a tough one, and
Or not ounces, we said meters. Let's do with that. Yeah.
You know,
No, I'm reading stuff on the fly here. So yeah, how many meters?
Okay, we just completed the 15,000 meter drill program, and we are going to be doing another 7,500 meter program, and we'll design that program as soon as we get all the results in from the 15,000 meter program. Now, if you bear with me for 1 minute, I'm just going to plug this in to make sure we don't lose the feed. There we are. We are plugged in.
Okay, I'm going to keep going.
Yep.
You know, again, I get this a lot. Any idea about when you might be able to get to a production decision? And you know, all premature, but people are building a mine in their head. Who might you sell your ore to? And you know, is there and the copper as well? So
yeah, sure. Well, first of all, we aim to put out an economic study by the end of the year. That's what we would like to do, barring major disruptions. We want to achieve that goal. After that, then we'll talk about production from that point forward. That said, with respect to permitting, one good thing about our project is we really are at an advantage there because we've had discussions with both BLM and the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection, the two main agencies that we need to deal with. Those guys there have said this is a disturbed site, not fully reclaimed. The permits are still there from the old Kinross days, so they just need to be renewed and updated. And as opposed to taking years to permit, it would be a matter of months. So stay tuned towards the end of the year when we get that economic study out. If things still look pretty good with respect to silver prices, etc., then we might be making a decision then. After that, it would be financing and construction, which might take a year to year and a half. And then who would we sell our ore to? The silver ore should be absolutely no problem. Make a silver doré. There's many markets out there. That's not an issue. And copper, well, stay tuned. We have to find a copper deposit. We haven't found one yet. We have indications that there's copper in the system.
Is there any potential copper in the asset, or are you all still?
Yes, there is copper in the asset, and I showed some of those samples that had good copper grades. We're seeing very good, almost pure gem quality turquoise veins coming up through the old silver pits, etc. So yeah, there's definitely copper there. What's going to happen down the road? Stay tuned.
Okay. Any claims associated? Do you have any direct connection with Native Americans and groups?
No, this is an area
in or around.
No, this is an area, particularly in the Candelaria area, where there really isn't much Native American, to our knowledge anyway. It's a big past producing area, very disturbed. So very limited population. I think the nearest small town, which has probably under 1,000 people, is probably about 15 to 20 miles away.
Okay. Business plan for the next 2 years beyond drilling and paying for drilling?
Well, essentially, drilling is an important component, and that's going to be determined which direction we go. As I'll just reiterate that we want to put out an economic study by the end of the year. If that economic study looks positive and silver prices are remaining healthy, then we may decide to make a production decision, in which case that will change the business plan and move things forward much more rapidly. If we are fortunate enough to find extremely high-grade mineralization down at our Phoenix Silver project, or a nice system over at Cherokee, that again would change the nature of our business plan moving forward, because we would want to put those on fast track towards more of a development situation as well. So that's what we're doing. So we're aiming.
Okay. And again, could you state the cash and burn level and burn rate?
Yeah, essentially.
And warrant status.
Yep. Okay. A lot of the warrants have been exercised. It's why we stay at around 12 million in our treasury currently. The projections for the expiration that we want to do for the rest of the year is probably somewhere between $5 and $6 million, maybe $7 million, depending upon the results that we get. Our annual cash burn with respect to a G&A is just about $1.5 million. So we have more than enough for the next year to 2 years if we want to drag it out. But if we're successful in getting very good results, then we may want to move forward more rapidly, which might change our financing needs going forward. The other thing with respect to the warrants is there's probably a good 10 to 12 million dollars in warrants that could come in as well. And they're all in money.
I'm going to pass this over to the analyst side of Amvest, Adam and Artie.
Thanks, Campbell. Hey, Greg, just a question for you conceptually at Candelaria. The ore that's sitting on the pads, do you envision having to move that ore, maybe crush it and stack it on a new pad or restack it on the existing pads? What's sort of the early stage concept there?
Yeah, we've thought about this, and we do have a plan which isn't quite finalized yet, but the idea would be, first of all, with respect to the existing pad or pads, there were various operators starting in the 1970s, and in the 1970s, we don't know the status of that underlying pad. So in short, we would probably, for ease of permitting, move it and put it on new pads. Now, the material currently on the heap leach pads sits at about 3/4 of an inch to an inch in size on average. We want to look at taking a portion of that, putting a new pad next to the existing pad, crushing that down using what's called HPGR, or high pressure grinder roller technology, grinding it down to about 2 millimeters, and then agglomerating it up to about 1 centimeter, putting it on the new pad and leaching it that way, and then leapfrogging as we go through the entire old pad. And that way we've got fresh new pads and we're current with the environmental regulations.
And that just brings to mind Rochester. Have you guys talked to Rochester about maybe doing some testing, bulk testing on your material?
We've done testing, and the people at Core are familiar with the testing that we have done. Our testing was done not through their facility. It's quite a ways away, their facility is. It's north of Reno. But we have shipped samples up to McClellan Labs and to Caps Cassidy in Reno, both very accredited firms. And as I said, Core is familiar with the results of that.
Historically, Kinross produced doré on site?
That's my belief. Yes, indeed, they did. And that was the method they used. They had essentially heap leaching and Merrill-Crowe system to finish things off.
And it would make sense to just basically replicate that, but granted, you know, perhaps a finer crush.
A finer crush, because these things have been partially leached in the past. So in order to access some of that silver that's tied up in the coarser material, a finer grind is going to give us better results. This is the preliminary findings that we're seeing, but we need to do a bit more testing to find out. And then the idea is, can we mix some of that ore with the higher grade fresh material marginal to the big open pits? And that's part of the ongoing studies, aiming to get that economic study out towards the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. So with the fresh ore, also for the fresh ore, you couldn't just pass that through an HPGR. You'd also need a primary crush.
Probably. I think we would, yes, and that's to be determined because we haven't done our testing. But I would think you would be correct.
And my recollection, there is a little bit of gold in there that goes to that also goes to the doré.
Yeah, what's interesting is the gold grades in the heap leach pads aren't that high per se, but some of the material that we're getting out of particularly the higher grade intercepts down dip have some pretty significant gold concentrations, and if we can find that, then indeed we would be processing a doré as well.
Is there any material that's preg robbing or anything like that, or little bits of copper that might be interfering with as you go deeper with the heap leach process?
Yeah, well, essentially the original recoveries out of the pits by Kinross were very similar to what Coeur is getting out of the Rochester mine, which is in the 50 to 55% recovery range. So what's happening with, and this is for on the oxide material and processing through heap leaching. What's inhibiting the rest of the silver from coming out? There's a mineral called jarosite, which is a very iron-rich mineral, and that seems to be inhibiting the recoveries of the rest of the silver. Now, we could do a super fine milling, and we've done some testing on super fine milling where we've had recoveries up to 75–80% silver. That's because the fine milling is really liberating a lot of that silver that's tied up with the jarosite. But is it cost effective to do that super fine milling? On the heaps, probably not, but maybe on some of that higher grade mineralization it will be. So stay tuned on that. Again, more testing.
I presume you not only would you do fine milling, but then you'd have to would you then tank leach that, or would you agglomerate it and put it on the pads?
No, I don't think if you do the super fine milling, you'd have to tank leach it as well. And then as we get down deeper, we're getting into some sulfide mineralization. So future down the road, and which is something to consider, then you might actually get into a flotation situation.
And what was this? Do you know what the cyanide consumption was? At the old Kinross operations, or was it rough? Do you know if it was roughly equivalent to Rochester?
I'm going to say yes, but I can't guarantee that. I'd have to go back and check all that information. I will confess I'm not a metallurgist, and I didn't look at that data in depth, but I assume that it's a very similar deposit in a way. They might have slightly higher gold grades, but as I said, some of that drilling that we're getting down dip with some of those more significant gold grades, maybe it's just where Kinross was mining the very near surface oxide, they weren't getting quite high gold grades. So I'm only assuming yes, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah, at Rochester, they seem to be, looking to, maximize the, economies of scale there.
Yes.
I mean, maybe at $30 silver, recently they're not quite as concerned with it, but certainly at lower silver prices, they needed to really maximize the economies of scale. Any thought about that for you guys?
Yeah, well, one thing that they did do was, when silver prices were down around, $12, $13, $14 per ounce, what they did was they decided to introduce HPGR. They didn't have HPGR crushing technology at Rochester prior to that, and then they introduced it. And they're seeing a bit of an increase in recoveries. And you're right, but the project of scale, could we do that here? We could look at, say, 2,000 ton per day operation, or if we do find a lot of more mineralization that we can mix and match with those heap leach pads, i.e. along strike or down dip high grade, then we can maybe go up to 5 to 10 to 15,000 tons per day, which would be phenomenal. We just need to make sure that we have feed for it, and that's where your economies of scale will come in. And plus, the original pit material is significantly higher grade. I mean, you're looking at 42 grams per ton on the heaps. The pits that were mined by Kinross were mined anywhere between 80 and 110 grams per ton, but that down dip high grade, it looks like you might have overall resource there somewhere in the 300 to 400 gram per ton. We don't know yet. We'll wait and see.
I'm just thinking, Greg, maybe it makes sense conceptually to contract mine it at much higher throughput levels in order to get, in order to, maybe, in order to, even though the mine life might be, shorter than you otherwise would do if you were, buying the equipment yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll certainly look at that when we do our studies. If that's the best economic way to go about bringing this back into production, then that's what we would look at.
So you're definitely going to have like a contract mine type trade-off study in the is that going to be for this end of your PEA or maybe for the next one?
Well, that would be for this end of the PEA, I think, is what we'd be looking at. The next one, I think would start incorporating things like the high grade underground, et cetera, which might change the nature. And as I said, if we're fortunate enough to find a big copper system underneath there with good silver and gold credits, it's going to change the nature of the operation significantly again.
Greg, are there any copper systems, porphyry types of size on the Walker Lane trend?
Nevada Copper's Pumpkin
Nevada,
Hollow,
right? Yarrington, I guess, is
which is right next door to the Yarrington Porphyry, which is right next door to the Ann Mason Porphyry, right, which Entree owned, my previous company. We actually did a very significant program on that, outlined a very sizable resource, and it got taken over by Hud Bay, and Hud Bay is moving forward with development. So.
Greg, are there in the Yarrington district, are there distal high-grade silver veins?
Well, yes, there are, as a matter of fact, particularly on the western side. There's some very high-grade silver and gold veins. And to the north, there's some interesting iron oxide deposits. And then, of course, to the east, we get those skarn deposits. IOCG, are they IOCG or skarn? Their debates go back and forth, but that's what Nevada Copper is currently mining. The old Yarrington mine itself is kind of dormant right now, but the Ann Mason, as I said, is being looked at and advanced by Hud Bay.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'll pass it on to Erdy. I'm sure he's got a couple of questions for you.
No problem, thank you. Thank you,
Adam. Thank you, Greg. So you mentioned you guys are planning to publish a technical report by the end of this year.
We want to do that, yes, indeed.
Yes, is it going to be a PA, or can you give us a little bit more clue?
No, not at this stage, and that will be determined by the engineers as to what is the level of the study itself. And the reason I'm being somewhat vague is because we're contemplating potentially looking at mixing some of the higher grade along strike materials, along strike from the pits, with the heap leach material. Now, the heap leach material has been drilled sufficiently that we could go PEA or even pre-feasibility level study, but the along strike might require additional drilling, and that's going to be a decision based on the engineers themselves. So we may not be able to go pre-feas on the whole thing. We may have to do a PEA or scoping.
I think you partially gave answers to this question. I'm wondering how your success in the leach pads depend on the blending of that ore with the higher grade near surface material.
Well, it depends on two things. Well, it depends on multiple factors. Recoveries and grade are very important. Silver price is also extremely important. The reason we're looking at potentially blending is because 42 grams per ton is interesting, and it's certainly higher grade than what Kinross is producing at. But as Adam pointed out, the economies of scale favor, not Kinross, I'm sorry, Coeur. Economies of scale favor Coeur's Rochester mine. They have the extremely large tonnage production situation. Now, could we go that way? Not on the heaps themselves, but if we start mixing and matching, then we're going to be improving grades, we're going to be improving hopefully overall recoveries, and the economies of scale eventually down the road will also be enhanced, and silver prices will be an important component.
Thank you, Greg. Campbell?
Okay.
Sure. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, for your great questions. Thank you, Adam and Artie, for digging in. On your way out, we'll be asking for feedback. Please share your feedback with us. It'll go straight to Greg. Anything you want to say? I'm going to pass it back to you, Greg, for to close us. And and the replay will be available in about an hour. You'll get an email on that and at amvestcapital.com/webinars and /replays rather. So Greg, maybe sum up next 12, 18 months and some catalysts and what makes us want to follow.
Okay, well, everybody,
closer.
Yeah, first of all, everybody, thank you for tuning in. And yes, indeed, we're going to be very active. We've got exploration programs on our 3 main projects going forward. We've got the results of the 15,000 meter drilling program at Candelaria coming out in the next few weeks. We are going to be doing another drill program there later in the year, another 7,500 meters, looking at various targets. We've got 2 other exciting projects, one in eastern Nevada that we want to get a drill on, probably in Q3, and we have a drill permit applied for on our extremely high-grade opportunity in Arizona. So we should have lots of news coming out. And for those of you not familiar with the company, our Mexican assets, we did sell our Mexican assets to a newly listed silver company. The valuation of that sale was between 5 and 6 million Canadian dollars. Injected some cash into our treasury. We should get another cash injection of another 1.5 million within 18 months, and on top of that, we have about 4.3 million shares in that company. So we do have other sources of income without going back to the market that include exercise of warrants and that, but we do have sufficient funds to achieve all of our goals, particularly this year. So stay tuned, lots of news coming out, and thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you all for attending, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Good day.
Thank you.